Hey everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. How are we all doing tonight? I hope you're all well and staying warm. Do any of you hire a domestic helper in your home to help take care of chores or to watch your children? This is not as common here in the States, but this is extremely common in Hong Kong. Many middle-class families hire a helper to help take care of their young children or elderly parents. It's very normal, and it's not seen as rich people behavior like it is here in the West. A majority of these helpers come from the Philippines and Indonesia, and when you hire them, they will be live-in helpers. They sleep in your house and will pretty much be part of the family, so it's pretty important that you know exactly who you are hiring and that you're comfortable with them before you do this. When you invite a stranger to live under your roof, you're not just bringing in a pair of hands to help, you're inviting their history, but sometimes it's possible that something else comes along with them. Tonight's story was shared by a woman. Let's call her Maggie. It's a terrifying story about the horror that came to her home after hiring a strange helper from the Philippines. Back in 2014, Maggie's family was living in a mid-level apartment in Kowloon. She and her husband had just welcomed their baby daughter at the time, and they needed help. Both Maggie and her husband worked full-time, so after her maternity leave, she needed someone to help watch the baby while she and her husband returned to work. Through an agency, they hired Maria, a Filipino helper who had actually worked in Hong Kong before. Maria seemed perfect. She was quiet, efficient, and experienced. Maggie and her husband loved how she was a little bit older because she had experience. Maria also mentioned that she had helped other families raise young infants before in Hong Kong, but she had to quit to return back home to the Philippines for a few years due to family issues. But now, she wanted to return to Hong Kong to work again. Maggie loved Maria's resume and hired her almost instantly. But from that first week, things already started to feel off. Maggie's baby was only 8 months old at the time. She couldn't talk yet, but she started doing something that made the hair on the back of Maggie's neck stand up. Every time Maria walked into the room, the baby wouldn't look at her face. Instead, her eyes would drift behind her. She would point to the empty air behind Maria's back and start to cry. Not a hungry cry, but a terrified, high-pitched scream, as if she saw something extremely disturbing. Maggie thought this was extremely strange, but she could never figure out why this was happening. Her baby's never done this before Maria's arrival, so the only thing that Maggie could do was just continue to monitor the situation whenever she was home. Then, Maggie began to notice something else that was extremely unsettling: Maria's behavior. Maggie noticed that Maria would oftentimes talk to herself in the kitchen in her native tongue. Not just mumbling, but having a full-on conversation, as if she was trying to get a small child to eat. At first, Maggie thought maybe she was talking to a family member or something over the phone, maybe through a Bluetooth headset. But as she got closer to look, there was no headset anywhere in sight. "Maria? Who are you talking to?" Maggie would ask her. Maria, not noticing Maggie approach, would immediately freeze up and then try to play it off, smiling and apologizing, saying that she had a bad habit of talking to herself as she worked, that it kept her focused. After 3 months, the mask finally began to slip. Maria started becoming more demanding. She wasn't asking for more money for her family, but she was asking for strange requests. She wanted more allowance for her to spend on groceries for the family, saying that the cheaper ingredients are not so healthy. So with more of an allowance, she would be able to buy the better and healthier ingredients for the baby. Maggie was a little bit confused. She gave Maria more than enough money to get the highest quality ingredients for her family. There were only 3 of them, and the baby. How is it possible that this is still not enough? But Maggie tried to be kind. She thought Maria was probably just homesick, so she agreed to give her a little bit more grocery allowance, since it seemed like that would be going back toward the household anyway. But soon, the atmosphere in the apartment was changing. It started feeling heavy. The hallway leading to the back of the apartment, where the kitchen, bathroom, and the servant's room were located, felt 10 degrees colder than the rest of the apartment. Eventually, the tension between Maria and Maggie became too much. The strange requests kept coming. Even though Maggie agreed to increasing the grocery budget, she has not once noticed any change in the groceries that Maria was bringing back every day. This led to some friction between them. One day, after a passive-aggressive argument, if you can even call it an argument, Maria suddenly quit. But she did it in a very strange way. She told Maggie, "I'm leaving, but I'm leaving my clothes here. I'll come back to pick them up soon. Don't touch anything in my room." Maggie was a bit shocked that Maria even had the audacity to continue making even more requests, even after quitting. But wanting to avoid further confrontation, something that Maggie always hated, she reluctantly agreed. She just couldn't wait for Maria to pick up her things soon and leave for good, so that way they can part ways in a clean fashion. Maria left in a hurry, leaving her suitcases and her closet locked. One evening, Maggie had a coworker over, Tina. Both of their husbands were away for work, and it had been a stressful week at the office for both of them. So she and Tina, who was her closest friend at the office, decided that they would just hang out at Maggie's and have some wine to unwind a bit. Around 7 p.m., just as the sun was dipping behind the skyscrapers outside, Tina went toward the bathroom in the back hallway. Suddenly, she came running back out to the living room, her face as white as a sheet. She was trembling. "Maggie," she whispered, "who's in the servant's room? I thought you said Maria quit already." Maggie looked at her confused and said, "No one. Maria's been gone for a week now. She hasn't come back yet for her stuff." Tina shook her head. "No, Maggie, there's sounds in there. I hear someone in there, rummaging through something." A little weirded out now, Maggie got up from the couch with her glass of wine to go check. There's no way Maria could have snuck in without her knowing. At the time, a bunch of thoughts were running through Maggie's head, but they were all logical thoughts, none of them related to the paranormal. Maybe Maria made a copy of the key, Maggie thought. She put her glass of wine down on the table and walked over to Maria's old room and aggressively opened the door and flipped on the light switch. There was nothing there. Maria's suitcases were still neatly placed where she had left them last. The closet was still locked. Maggie looked back at Tina. "See? She's not here. There's no possible way she could sneak in here without me knowing. You must have had too much wine." Tina didn't look convinced, but they exited the room. Maggie didn't bother closing the door. It's my home, she thought. Why should I still close Maria's old door? It's not even her room anymore. Tina proceeded to the bathroom, while Maggie returned to sip on her wine in the living room. But a few minutes later, as Tina left the bathroom, Maggie heard a high-pitched scream. Then, the sound of running. Tina made a mad dash back out to the living room from the bathroom. Her face looked frantic and scared. "Maggie, I have to get out of here. I saw two little boys right by Maria's room. They were both crouching down by the suitcases. They were just crouching there, chewing on their fingers until they bled. They looked like they were starving." Maggie saw how scared Tina was and instinctively trusted her. Though she couldn't see anything, she decided to play it safe and just spend the night at Tina's. She didn't want to be home alone for the night after hearing what Tina saw. They both grabbed their stuff quickly and scrambled out of the apartment. The next morning, Maggie immediately called the master from the temple she visits. Master Wu. Master Wu has known Maggie for years now. They were friends at this point. He was the one that helped Maggie bless and consecrate her Guanggong statue when she first moved in. When Maggie explained to him what happened last night, Of course, Master Wu had to shift the schedule around to help her take a look. When he arrived, he didn't even need to walk to the back of the apartment. He stood in the living room and pointed toward the hallway. "You have something back there, trapped," he said. "They didn't follow you home. They were brought here by your helper." Then he pointed to Maggie's altar in the living room. "You have a Guanggong altar here," the master said, looking at the statue. "I remember helping you consecrate him when you first moved in. Your altar is powerful. It creates a barrier of light. But those things back there, they are dark." He explained that Maria had raised 2 spirits. One of the spirits is her own deceased infant, and the other one is a Kuman Thong, a golden child spirit. She tried to use them to bind employers and to make them soft-hearted and easier to control. But because the altar blocked the hallway, the spirits were trapped in the back of the apartment. They couldn't get to the living room to find food or offerings, and since Maria hadn't been there for a whole week to feed them with rituals, they were starving. A ghost that is not fed will eat its own essence. That's why they were gnawing at their own limbs. They were dying a second death from hunger. The master entered the servant's room. He turned on the light, and Master Wu had a look around. He made his way to the locked closet. "They are in here," Master Wu said. Maggie scrambled to her own room to take out her spare keys and locate the one for the closet. She gave the key to Master Wu. Hidden inside, a rolled-up bundle of Maria's clothes near the bottom of the closet, he found a small clay jar wrapped in red thread. It was cold to the touch. Master Wu picked the jar up. "These poor children," he said. He took the jar back to the temple to perform a liberation ritual, defeat the spirits, and send them to the next cycle so they would no longer be trapped and hungry. The moment the ritual was completed at the temple, something extremely strange happened. After no contact from Maria for a whole week, all of a sudden, Maggie's phone exploded with messages. It was Maria. 32 missed calls, and a ton of unread messages came through. She was hysterical. "What did you do to my room? I'm coming back right now. Don't touch my things." She must have felt the moment the connection was broken. The leash she had on the children was snapped. Maggie blocked her number and changed the locks the same day. She later found out from the previous agency that Maria had done this before, extorting thousands of dollars from an elderly man who became confused and obsessed with keeping her happy in the last family she worked for. Apparently, she only left that job because she went back to the Philippines to give birth to her own child. But tragically, the infant didn't survive. She stayed home in the Philippines for a few years after that. So the next time you hear a noise in your helper's room, or the next time your child points at shadows behind someone's back, ask yourself, what is really in your house? Alright, Hong Kong horror family, what do you think happened here in Maggie's story? Please pause the video here and let us all know what you think. So there's a lot to unpack here. So what do I think happened here from a Chinese cultural perspective? The first thing I wanted to talk about is Maggie's daughter and how she seemed to always see something around Maria that made her cry. I don't think this was a coincidence. It's believed that babies have something called Tinan Mei Bai. Her spiritual sight hasn't closed yet due to her young age. We believe that all humans are born with somewhat Tsapak, 3 souls and 7 spirits, and a weak, bit open, 1 Pak Ikao soul structure. When we're babies, the ethereal soul, is loose. The Pak, corporal soul, is dominant, and Yang energy is present but thin, making babies perceptually porous. Children under 6 or 7 years old can usually see things that they're not supposed to, because their Yang is not fully formed yet. They're also pure. They haven't accumulated karma yet. They haven't had to make any moral compromises in life yet. They also haven't been taught to rationalize fear away. Because of a combination of many of these similar external factors, or lack of it, kids can usually perceive things directly and react honestly to these energies, as they don't have these so-called filters that we develop as we grow older. Many times, the child isn't imagining what they're seeing. They're just responding to something that you're blind to. Elders also say that kids can see things because they have only recently come from the yin realm themselves, meaning they have only recently reincarnated from their past life, so they may not have fully forgotten their past life yet. They still carry fragments of memories. You'll hear sayings like, 細路仔記得返來的路. Children remember the way back. But like all of us, children eventually grow up, and as they get to around 7 or 8 years old, the spiritual perception eventually closes most of the time. The next thing I want to talk about is Maria. Master Wu mentions that it was Maria who brought these two spirits with her. Do you know what this is? You might have an idea if you've watched some of my older episodes. Maria was definitely actively raising spirits, 养鬼. So what does 养鬼 actually even mean? If we translate this literally, it means to raise or to keep a spirit. It's an ongoing, intentional relationship. So once you start raising a spirit, it depends on you, and it expects to be maintained and fed. Now, I personally think there were two entirely different types of entities here. The first is what's known as Kuman Thong in Thai, Kuman Thong in Cantonese. This is a ritual bond spirit originating from Thai practices. It's a spirit that's invited, maintained, and it's transactional. A Kuman Thong lives on offerings. It performs tasks for its owner, but it requires constant routine acknowledgement. As much as some people might think this sounds like it would be a cool or interesting idea to raise a ghost, please don't do this. It's extremely dangerous. This is a ritual relationship and purely transactional. Once offerings decrease or attention fades, the spirit is believed to turn disruptive, and it could become dangerous really quickly, as the spirit usually retaliates. The danger is that it becomes parasitic, feeding off the living's resources. I actually think this is exactly what happened in Maria's situation. It seemed that Maria was already raising the spirit before, when she used to work in Hong Kong already, before she gave birth. I think that this Kuman Thong had a hand in the death of her own child, either directly or indirectly. It was like she had a dangerous parasite around her, even when she was pregnant. It doesn't physically strike, but its energy influence can disrupt life and health, especially in infants. I don't believe that the second spirit, the spirit of Maria's baby, was a Kuman Thong, but rather it was a Yingling, which translates to the spirit of a baby who died before being fully integrated into the family or society. Elders say, Yingling 唔識恨，只識黐人. An infant spirit doesn't know how to hate. It only knows how to cling. So I think that's why it's stuck around. In Chinese folk logic, most spirits linger for one of 3 reasons: resentment, unfulfilled wish, or attachment. I think that this Yingling clung to Maria because of attachment. Baby spirits are different from adult spirits because babies have no clear sense of self. They don't have an understanding of death. So when death happens when they're so young, the belief is that the emotional bond to the mother doesn't break cleanly. 未斷奶，未斷情. If the milk bond isn't broken, neither is the emotional bond. As for why this spirit hung around the raised spirit, the Kuman Thong, it's because spirits cluster by energy. They're drawn to familiar emotional energy. The Kuman Thong is like a lit candle in a dark room with similar frequencies and energy as the deceased child spirit. It was like a moth in the dark that didn't know where else to go, so it naturally hung around the Kuman Thong. Spirits without direction can sometimes attach to structured spirits, which is something that happened here. Even though they were completely different types of entities, they formed somewhat of a pseudo-family unit. Maria had a formed connection to them, which is why she was able to feel that connection break once Master Wu released them. Elders describe the bond between a living person and a spirit they raise as a kind of invisible cord that feeds the spirit emotional energy, ritual attention, and practical offerings like food. Once Master Wu took the spirits away, fed them, and then released them, that cord was cut instantly. She must have felt that energy shift immediately. They say a raised spirit is like an extension of your energy. Once they are freed, your control, bond, and influence are gone. Thank you, Hong Kong Horror family, for making it all the way to the end of this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. Until we speak again next week, stay safe and good night.